Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Bechet, and this is the AAF Exchange, a podcast from the American Action Forum, where experts provide clear, data-driven insights into today's economic and domestic policy issues. Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. So, who you got in the games this weekend?
Well, I'm gonna watch the NFC game with my daughter and her husband. So they're Commanders fans. I think I'm going with the Commanders.
I think you have to. I
don't view that as. The truth is, I don't just like the Eagles all that much. I've always been.
They're your cross-state rival, though.
Yeah, but I've always been a Jalen Hurts fan. The way he got treated at Alabama, I thought was horrible, and he has really made himself into an NFL quarterback. I think he's a great story. Mm-hmm. And it's hard not to look at Saquon Barkley and think, oh my God. I mean, that's
something special.
That's special. It is. You don't see that very often.
Yeah, I'm going Commanders too. I think they just, I like the Cinderella team.
Why not?
And
Bills and Chiefs. I'm not a Chiefs hater like a lot of people. Like most people hate the Chiefs. I don't. I think Andy Reid's the best coach I've ever seen. I admire what he does with that team every year. And and the Bills, it's hard for me to love the Bills. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, see, for me,
they should just fall in the lake. And
I don't like either of them. So I'm just like
that's
you.
That's always great when you're rooting for injuries.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I'm rooting for a meteor or something to strike.
Meteor. Okay. Well, you know me.
The Bills are my divisional rival, and the Chiefs are trying to do what the Patriots did, which I don't obviously want to happen. So,
well, as you know, I'm now rooting for the Bills Eagles with backup quarterbacks. So let's do it.
Revenge of the Steelers. All right. On that note, I'm going to do the intro.
Okay.
On this episode of the AAF Exchange, the Trump administration's international priorities, Congress's urgent policy to-dos, and TikTok situation. Joining us to discuss all this, AAF President Douglas Holtz-Eakin and Director of Technology and Innovation, Jeff Westling. Doug, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So before we jump
Happy 2025?
Yeah. Have we done one?
I don't know.
I think we've done one, so this might be number 2 for the 2025.
Okay.
But anyways, what's been on your mind recently?
Greenland.
Yeah.
Got to get Greenland. No, I think the whole thing's fascinating. First of all, like most people, when he sort of developed a Greenland interest when he was first president, I just sort of laughed. I said, what is this? And, here we go again. And then, of course, I thought, well, maybe we should find out a little bit about this. Like, is it worth buying Greenland or not? And so Fred Ashton and Jacob Jensen started scrubbing the numbers, and they've got a nice insight on our website. But you can think of Greenland two ways. More than two ways, but we sort of give us a boundary. One, you can say, what is Greenland? It's a lot of valuable minerals, so oil, natural gas, scarce minerals, and you can look at the market prices of those, and you come up with $4.4 trillion worth of minerals, not all of which is probably recoverable. So if you sort of go down to the part that's economically viable, you end up with about $200 billion as if I want those minerals, I can say, dear Denmark, here's $200 billion, give me Greenland. Or you can say, okay, what matters is where it is, because it is in the North Atlantic, which is a hugely strategic thing with all the Soviet naval stuff that comes out of the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea and heads down. And it's also where, because of the receding Arctic ice cap, there's going to be new shipping lanes over the North Pole, so the location matters. So another way to do it is say, okay, what's that location worth? The only thing else in that location is Iceland. So we took the cost of a square kilometer of Iceland and extrapolated that to Greenland, and then you get a very big number. Mm-hmm. You get yourself a $2.8 trillion price tag, and so, that might seem like a lot of money, but it might be worth it for those locations and/or minerals. And Denmark can do this math too. So if you're going to get in this business, don't expect to get it cheap. It's going to cost you some money. So that's the Greenland story. I'm curious to see if this, we haven't. You might notice there are other values that are in play as well. Like the Greenland population, as the United States, does not want to join the United States. So their rights might figure into this calculation somewhere. Self-determination, freedom, all the things we say we believe in. Right. And then it turns out we've been doing this for a long time. I didn't realize we'd made bids for Greenland before.
Interesting. I didn't know.
Harry Truman tried to buy it.
Okay.
We offered him $100 million in gold bars, and they said no thanks. And probably location, right? I mean, that would have been post World War II. And so we've bought a bunch of different things over time. We buy islands, we buy stuff, and
I mean, the most famous one, the Louisiana Purchase,
which was a great buy.
Yeah,
like in current dollars, it's under $900 billion. That's a steal. So I'm laughing because like this president's the art of the deal. Thomas Jefferson's got it. It's over. He's got the best deal historically. And no one's going to beat him.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing, this whole paper exercise reminded me a lot of when we did the Green New Deal paper.
Sure.
And just, let's put a number on it and just see what it would actually cost us.
The serious part of this is I think it's important to know the order of magnitude of things.
Yeah.
Like if it's going to cost you $10 million to buy Greenland. Buy two. I mean, if it's going to cost you $100 million, that's probably doable. $100 billion? How about 10 trillion.
Yeah.
So, you need to know where you are in this.
Right.
And we're in the hundreds of billions to trillions category, and that's real money.
Interesting. All right, let's move on. The newly minted President Trump quickly began work on some of his campaign promises, while others seem to be on pause. Let's focus on tariffs, immigration, the international priorities. Start with tariffs. Where are we?
We're thinking.
Yeah.
We have an official presidential memo, not an executive order, a presidential memorandum to all the agencies to say, think about the tariffs and whether they're in our interest, in your interest, how would they affect your portfolio. This seems like a way to just buy time. Mm-hmm. The exception to that, let's think about it rule, which probably applies to the across-the-board tariff the most, is his continued pledge to impose tariffs on Mexico and Canada, most recently by February 1st. He has finally been explicit about something which I suspected, but didn't know, which is this is really a way to get them to reopen the USMCA trade agreement earlier than needs to be renegotiated. And that's a bit perplexing to me because his stated reason for caring about it is autos. Mm-hmm. And, holy 1950s. Let's stop staring back at the auto industry. This is a tiny fraction of employment. It's a tiny fraction of national output. It's not the centerpiece of the American economy anymore. And so I don't understand why you would pick a fight with your two most important allies, your biggest trading partners, over an industry that is literally history. Mm-hmm. But this is where we are.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he used this as a negotiating tactic in his first term in office, right? Like when we originally redid NAFTA, and I believe he did it with China too, in phase 1, phase 2 type stuff. So it's certainly not a new tactic on his part.
No, I think what is new is it's 2025.
Yeah. And
so again, I just laugh because when he first mentioned this, the Mexican president said, "Okay, fine, we'll do 25." Mm-hmm. Trudeau just said, "Yeah, we'll do 25 too." And we've got programs in place to compensate our citizens for the cost of us putting up 25% tariffs, and we're ready for you. Mm-hmm. So what's always been missing in the analytics of the argument for tariffs is the impact of the retaliation. And the retaliation is going to be real and it's going to be quick.
Okay, let's move on to immigration. Yep. It seems there is a bit more nuance between much of Trump's campaign rhetoric and what we've heard the past few days. Walk us through the latest on this one.
Well, the border security was probably the most predictable, and that's going as expected. Executive orders remain in Mexico, shutting down the asylum route, at least temporarily, sending 1,500 troops to the border. Remember, Biden sent troops to the border, too. It's not unprecedented to send more manpower down there. So the border security per se, about as expected, on about the timetable as expected. Bigger thing has been the deportation, where no one really knew how quickly that would happen, and it didn't happen day 1, it happened day 2, so, for whatever that's worth. But we haven't seen widespread ICE raids on businesses or things like that, which was kind of what was leaked in advance of the inauguration. He has essentially deputized other federal law enforcement agencies, U.S. Marshals, FBI's, DEA agents, to detain people and deport them. So there's a broader effort to sort of find folks who are here illegally and deport them. The jury's still out on the ultimate scale and impact of this. It is the most problematic. Getting 300,000 or 400,000 recent illegal immigrants who are known felons out of the country, I think is unobjectionable, and most people are going to support. Trying to take 11 million people out of the country, many of whom have been here for a long, long time.
Yep.
That's a different ball of wax. So we'll see where it ends up. It's somewhere in between.
Yeah, I'm sure the economics behind it aren't.
They're dreadful. We know that. I mean, getting rid of like 6% of your labor force generally reduces economic output.
Yeah.
And so, so I remain, on hold, trying to figure out what exactly that is.
There was some, he has started making distinctions between illegal and legal immigration now.
The rhetoric has changed. A big change, certainly from 2016-17. Even on the campaign trail, he once had this moment where he said, well, we should staple a green card to these folks who graduate from U.S. universities with advanced degrees. That's something politicians have said for a long time. It's never actually happened. In rolling out the sort of deportation orders, he said, we need legal immigration. And you have to wonder if this is the influence of an Elon Musk on his rhetoric, because the H-1B program in particular is something the business community has been just very vociferous about the need for and the need to expand. And, that hasn't happened yet. This raises the chance maybe it could.
Yeah, maybe it's time to bring back AAF's legal immigration plan that I think Jackie did a long time ago.
It made sense to me then. It still makes sense to me. We've had this conversation before. We need more immigration going forward because we don't have enough babies. Not complicated. And it's a big economic policy opportunity to dictate the pace at which the labor force grows, the composition of the labor force, everything about the future labor force. So,
by the way, probably more revenue for the government.
Not everything's about revenue, Kyle. That's nice. And of course, the president did mention in his inaugural address the External Revenue Agency. So,
we'll leave that alone. We'll leave that alone for now. But let's talk about Congress. They've obviously gotten to work. I believe we will hit we probably will learn at 4 p.m. today that we've hit the debt limit.
Yesterday.
Yesterday. At 4 p.m. today, we'll learn that we hit the debt limit yesterday, or we're about to be hitting the debt limit. What does this mean in practice, and where do we go from here?
In practice, it means that the Treasury is now in the process of undertaking extraordinary measures to keep us under the debt limit. So that means you take things that count toward the debt limit, most notably Treasury securities that are in the retirement accounts of government employees, and you pull them back. That's called stealing. But now you're under the debt limit, and then you can issue new securities to the public for cash, and you can run the government. And you can do that for a while, probably to late May, early June, something like that. And there'll be a lot of discussion about the, quote, X date, the date at which you run out of the ability to do that. And then you just have to waive the debt limit or raise it. You have to do something legally, or we default. And that's unthinkable. So that's the practical impact of this. It is becoming apparent that of the things that the Republican Congress wants to do and the president would like them to do, reconciliation bill on taxes and other things, fund the government, debt limit, this is the hardest. And it's quickly becoming clear this is the hardest. 38 Republicans said no in the lame duck when the president wanted it. So I think they're in a position where, perhaps to their surprise, one of the most pressing things is something they're going to need Democrats' help on.
Yeah.
I don't see them getting that cheaply. That's going to be a transaction worth taking a look at.
Yeah, I mean, they're about to have one vote majority in the House. I mean, you're going to automatically need votes in the Senate.
One vote majority, lose 38. Oops.
Yeah. So the math isn't great
bad
there. So yeah, we're gonna, it's not gonna be an easy undertaking on that. Is this something that we will probably deal with when we have to redo the government funding debate? That's
a place. I mean, now we're playing the game of what do we attach this to? And you're hearing things like, we're not going to give California any aid for the wildfires unless we put the debt limit on it. Okay, so we're going to hold the victims of a natural disaster hostage to that. So a lot of this is pure raw politics that's not very attractive. Doesn't seem to me it makes it over the finish line. Hurts them more than it helps them. But the most important thing is it has to happen, and it's looking increasingly difficult. So they're going to have to do some real work.
On the budget process, specifically, we have reconciliation being worked on. Congress is counting on using reconciliation to achieve a lot of their must-do, their top priorities. How is this taking shape?
Well, now all of Washington is united and focused on one big, beautiful bill. That's something that no one thought could happen.
Yeah.
Of course, what's in that one big, beautiful bill, no one has any idea. When you're going to pass the budget resolution to make it possible to do the one big, beautiful bill, no one knows. Whether they have the votes for the one big, beautiful bill, I think the answer is no right now. And again, thin margins, real divisions among Republicans on key aspects of it. If nothing else, you've got some folks, probably 8 or so in the House, who do not want deficits to get any larger, and you've got people in the House who want to get rid of the cap on state and local tax deductions, SALT, or at least raise it substantially, which would create more deficits. How do you get them on the same bill?
Right.
That's one example of a lot of things. And so this is going to be a hard process, and you can't really issue the instructions for a reconciliation bill, which require committee-by-committee instructions until you sort of know where the votes are. And so there's a sort of got to know the votes, but to know the votes, you got to know what the bill is. To know what the bill is, you got to know the votes. There's a lot of work here, right?
Chicken and egg type situation. What comes first? A lot of work. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because we started off this whole process. Are they going to do? It was like the Dr. Seuss thing. Are we going to do 1 bill, 2 bill, 3 bill?
Well, we even heard 3 bills just a day ago. I mean, so it goes on.
I forgot about that. Yeah. So, anyways, before I let you go, before we turn to Jeff,
before I am freed from my captivity,
before you're freed, let's do a trivia question.
Of course.
What was the final rule cost for the Biden administration?
$1.8 trillion.
Correct. Yep, you got it. Nailed it. Astonishing.
Unbelievable. Astonishing?
Yeah. I mean, it's
Welcome to Kyle's last podcast.
I mean, it's not
astonishing that I knew. Astonishing the number.
The number.
I thought it was astonishing. You thought it was astonishing that I knew.
No. I would hope you would know this one.
It's a breathtaking number.
Yeah,
really is.
I know we've probably beat this drum quite a bit on this podcast, but I mean, it is hard to wrap your head around how we got. I mean, if you just go back and look at the Obama and numbers, it's hard. It's hard to figure out.
They are so breathtaking that even Karl Rove noticed.
Yeah,
it was in the Wall Street Journal today.
Right.
So people are starting to recognize what went on, and it has big implications for the economy.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see how. I'm sure Trump will handle this President Trump will handle this in a very different way. We already know that. Well, from his last time that he used those reg budgets, we'll see if he brings them back. I'm assuming we'll know a lot more by the next podcast, and we'll have we'll have Dan Gold back on to lay it all out for us. So we know what to expect.
Yes, yes, we do.
Doug, thanks for joining us. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Should we just jump right into things, or do you want to talk about something else first?
No, let's stay focused for once in our podcast.
I know you got to go to a few hearings, so we'll just jump right into things. The Supreme Court TikTok ruling had many in panic on the internet, but here we are a week later, still scrolling for some people. Briefly walk us through the court's ruling, what's happened since, and the future of the app.
Yeah, so the bill essentially said you have to divest or we're going to ban you. And TikTok has fought that kind of from the beginning. They've refused to divest, so it went to the Supreme Court. And the court really focused in on arguments about data security. And they were saying China is accessing all this user data, this user information. They're tracking your strokes, you're tracking what you do, what you like, all these different things, so they could build profiles on people. And they really focused in on that, said this regulation isn't about content, it's about access to that data, and it's a security risk. So they upheld the divest or ban rule. So now it's up to TikTok to decide whether they're going to divest or ban. Obviously, though, that deadline has come and passed, and it's still kind of online, and that's because President Trump came out and said, we are not going to enforce this law, essentially. You still will violate the law if you host TikTok or have it in your app store, but we're not going to actually enforce it. So that has led to some confusion where Google and Apple, the app store companies, are not hosting that app on their app store. They're not letting you download it because they don't want to be liable if Trump changes his mind or if there's something in the future. There's a ton of penalties associated with this, so they have not allowed people to download it. But Oracle, I think, is the one that's hosting the app on their server, so that it's actually running the app still. And I think that they've taken the assurances of Trump seriously, and they're like, well, if they say they're not going to enforce it, we're going to allow this to continue. So there are some users who never got rid of the app that are still able to use it. But people who maybe deleted the app or never had it can't get access to it now.
Interesting. One of the arguments about banning TikTok is a violation of free speech. Mm-hmm. What do you make of these arguments?
So they're interesting arguments because the underlying concern with TikTok isn't as much about the data. It is, but the really serious concerns is China controlling discourse in the United States. They're able to push content that looks good for China. Maybe they downrank stuff about Taiwan or Tiananmen Square or even Ukraine, Russia. They can change what content comes up in your algorithm. And that's a very serious concern, but it's also much more of a First Amendment thing. People have the right to get the content that they want to seek out. TikTok is a U.S. company, and it has a right to feed content as it wants to. So the court kind of ignored that. It really didn't dive too much into that concern and really focus on the data security, said this is enough on its own to uphold the law. And the more you're focused on data security and data control, that is less of a First Amendment issue. The more you're getting into the content that consumers are getting, that's a problem. And then the other kind of First Amendment argument that I don't really feel like is as strong, but it's an interesting one, is the First Amendment rights of the users themselves. I know there's specific arguments made before the court that was saying the users themselves have a First Amendment right to see this content. But I would argue that I wouldn't argue this, but I'm kind of not arguing either side. But the lawyers for the DOJ essentially argued that no, you can go to any other platform if they don't divest or ban, but obviously they could still divest, and you would still have that content. So it's also not just an outright ban.
Are there any broader implications for the social media market?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because you would think that Reels would really be the biggest benefit. Maybe YouTube. You'd get a lot of this traffic going to these other websites, and we probably will see that. But immediately, the more interesting response is that people are going to Chinese apps. They're like, you know what? I don't like the government banned this app. My form of rebellion is to give China more of my data, which is such an interesting take, and it's weird to see, but the bill itself could allow the president to designate one of those apps as foreign controlled. So it's not like that'll last forever, but it is a very interesting human response to this. But we will probably see some of these other tech companies benefit.
I think I saw yesterday there was a story. Meta is already trying to get influencers. They're offering them some benefits program or something like that.
I mean, I didn't see that, but I know they do that with live streaming all the time, where you would have a big Twitch streamer on whoever, and YouTube wants to have their gaming streaming going, so they'll pay those content creators to be exclusive to their platform. So I wouldn't be surprised if Facebook or Meta or whoever, YouTube, is paying subscribers or not subscribers, content creators from TikTok to come to their platform and use it exclusively. I haven't heard that specifically, but that wouldn't surprise me if that's a business decision they decide to make.
Interesting. Well, Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I will let you go because I know you got to get out of here.
We get to talk Spectrum. That is what we need to talk about in the podcast. It's much more interesting.
You go have fun at that hearing.
All right.
Thanks,
you.
Jeff. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Tune back in for our next episode, where our experts will provide clear, data-driven insights into today's economic and domestic issues. I'd also encourage you to check out any of the links in our show notes, and also follow us on social media to learn more about AAF. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play.